And do you remember we used to watch that YouTuber Alex Reads Twilight? And
yes,
there was that section where he was like, Bella, I caught myself whistling. Like, what? Wouldn't want to be too happy, would we? And like, that's how I feel about monogamy. It's like when you're in a relationship and you're with somebody, but then you meet someone else who you also have this deep connection with, you have to feel a little bit guilty about it because like you're only supposed to have one. It's like, wouldn't want to be too happy and have too many fulfilling relationships. Now, would we? That would be awful.
I'm Jen.
And I'm Liz.
And we're Harmless Harlots.
What does that mean?
It means we believe in ethical non-monogamy. To us, that means being open to having more than one relationship, however you define it, as long as everyone gives fully informed, enthusiastic consent.
It's also an homage to our poly Bible, the Ethical Slut, which we recommend if you want to learn more.
Because we are enthusiasts, not experts in this field. So if you want to learn and explore along with us, we give you our knowing consent to come along.
So what are we going to do?
Well, I am currently reading the book Sex at Dawn by Christopher Ryan and Cacilda Jethá. It's a book that Lizzie gave me for Christmas. Thanks, Lizzie.
Because I'm a great sister.
She's a great sister. So I have a lot of thoughts about this book. So we're going to start there and see where that takes us.
But first, who are we?
Who are we? What an excellent question. I can start. Well, first, we're sisters who both like ethical non-monogamy. I found it through the Ethical Slut in a class that I took at school.
Wait, I thought I gave you the Ethical Slut. Didn't I introduce you to that book?
I think I first heard of it in a class I took. You may have found it independently.
I definitely found it independently because when I went to Colorado with one of my partners at the time, Greg, I stayed with his brother and his brother's partner, Nick. And Nick introduced it to me, and I'm pretty sure I at least told you about it then, but I don't think you read it until a few years later.
I identify with polyamory a lot. I would not say I don't have a lot of quote-unquote romantic experience. I have a lot of thoughts about what romance is. But so that's where I'm coming at this from. Liz, who are you?
I am on the opposite end of the spectrum. And I used to keep a list of all of my romantic experiences, quote unquote, to put it PG. And I stopped keeping that list quite a while ago when it got so large that I was like, this is no longer practical to do. But yeah, I didn't really start experimenting with my sexuality and romantic love life until college. But then in college, we dove in full force. And at the school I went to, a lot of people practiced what they called hookup culture. There weren't really a lot of monogamous relationships. It was a very, very academic, nerdy college where the focus really was on your studies, which is what you do at nerd college. So we didn't have a lot of like dating happening. So we did have a lot of hookup culture though. But the way I always practiced hookup culture was all of my partners were always aware of each other. I usually had 2 or 3 at a time. Most of them lasted for at least a few months. I didn't really do one-night stands. So I typically did have, a sort of polyamorous network of people at all times. But I never really thought about that as like a valid lifestyle choice when I was in college. That was just kind of like, hookup culture. This is what we do in college. But when you leave college, surely you will like adjust to society and settle down. And then when I graduated, I did have one monogamous relationship for about 3 months right when I graduated college. And that was fine, but I didn't find it particularly fulfilling. And it got old pretty fast. And I think in retrospect, both of us would have actually been happier if we were practicing polyamory at the time. But c'est la vie is in the past. So after that relationship ended, I kind of went back to the old way that I had operated in college, where I always had just kind of several casual lovers at any given time, just like friends that I was also sleeping with. And again, I never really thought of that as like a valid lifestyle choice. I was like, oh, this is just what I'll do while I'm young. And then someday I'll meet the one and we will settle down and get married and do the typical thing. Until I went on a trip to Colorado with one of my lovers at the time, and we stayed with his brother. And his brother was in a polyamorous relationship, and that was a relatively new concept to me. So I talked to his brother and his partner at the time about that, and they introduced me to the Ethical Slut. And I think I read just like the first chapter of that book, but not the whole thing at the time. And that was really the first time that it occurred to me that like, oh, maybe the current lifestyle I'm living isn't just something I'm going to do while I'm young. Maybe that's something that would be like a valid lifestyle to carry throughout the rest of my life. And I think it was another year before I bought the book. A friend of mine and I both bought the book actually, and we were going to do a book club, but then he stopped reading it and I got way too into it and got too far ahead of him for that to work. Everything in the book just like resonated with me. I was like, this is how I've been living my life. This is what I find fulfilling. I didn't think I could do this in the long term, but it seems like if other people have done it in the long term and it's worked, then like I can too. So now that's what I'm trying to do as an adult, is just continue the relationship style that I had in college, where I typically at any given time will have 2 to 3 sexual partners. And we have very intimate, fulfilling relationships. Some of us go on dates, some of us don't. It kind of just depends on what each person wants. And it's very complementary is what I've found. Like I have partners that are all very different and fulfill different needs for me. So like some of them really like to cook meals with me and have dinner, and that's great. And others do not like to cook at all and would rather have takeout. So they all have, you know, different likes and interests and stuff, which is great because it gives me a lot of like variety in my life. So.
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, when I discovered we'll use the word polyamory. The broad umbrella term is ethical non-monogamy. Okay. I don't at this moment, I should have Googled it, know exactly how polyamory is different from that. But
that's a good point. We should look that up.
For the moment, we'll use it roughly synonymously. But I think my experience is that when I discovered polyamory, it resonated with me a lot. And I think while I haven't really had the same kind of experience with like having multiple sexual partners, I would say that it's just kind of, I think it's also related to the fact that I may be aromantic. That's a discussion for another time.
My theory.
But I would say the closest that I've probably been is that I was very close with a couple, a man and a woman, my freshman year of college.
I was rooting so hard for you to thruple. I was in it, I think, more than you were.
But that was before I discovered polyamory, and so I was very straight-laced and like, thruple isn't a thing. But if I was the person I am now back then, that would have been nice. But no, I think that just the concept of having, you know, whoever you have, I described it as connection, whoever you have a connection with, being able to pursue that is not detrimental to, shouldn't be, or doesn't have to be detrimental to other connections that you have.
Yeah, I don't think one connection should threaten another. I mean, we do have like limited time, but I think a lot of people kind of underestimate the amount of emotional resources people have. Like they think, oh, you can only love one person. Like that's all you can handle because it's too much to love more. And I think that's dumb.
Yeah, there's a great part in the book that talks about that. I did some Googling. Technically, polyamory is a form of ethical non-monogamy. Also, ENM is its abbreviation. ENM is not having one specific partner, but instead multiple partners, both sexual and romantic in nature. Polyamory means to have more than one sexual partner, and is a form of it. So I guess polyamory is specifically sexual.
Okay, so polyamory
if
then
you want to get technical.
Describe what I'm doing, because I do have sex with my partners, although not all of them. I mean, there are people who I feel like I have more intimate relationships with that I don't have sex with, who I would still probably describe as a partner. But
words are tools. Ethical non-monogamy, polyamory, when we're talking about it,
words are tools to convey meaning.
Especially me, who is in the past been fairly asexual, I will say that, you know, for me, it's just an experience of connection. Maybe there's sex, maybe there's not. That's what I would say.
Did I tell you that my therapist and I discussed you at our last session?
Oh, why?
Yeah.
In good ways?
No, in good ways. So the last session I had with my therapist was before you and I took our trip to Texas, and I had told her that we were doing that. So this session, when I came back, she asked me how the trip had been and what we had done on the, 16-hour drive. And I said we had listened to a lot of polyamory podcasts, and I had gotten you Sex at Dawn, and we had read that book and stuff. And I said, because we both identify as polyamorous. And she was like, wait, you both identify as polyamorous? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, that's crazy. I don't think I've ever met a single person in my life who actually identifies as polyamorous until you. I think she was raised very conservatively. She's not my favorite therapist.
That makes sense.
But anyhow. So she was like, what are the odds that two siblings are both polyamorous? That's crazy. And I was like, well, actually, all four of the siblings in my family do not identify as straight. That was one of the discussions we had over the holidays, was none of us identify as straight. And she was like, that's wild. Do you think in part that's because of you? Do you think as the oldest, you influence them? And I was thinking about that, and I was like, maybe to an extent, but here's how I would kind of qualify my influence. So when you shaved your head, it was right after I had gotten my undercut. And I remember when I got my undercut, and, I had said how good it felt and how much I liked it. And then you shaved your head. The way you told us was you sent a picture to the family of your shaved head, and you captioned it, Lizzie did it first, but I did it better. And I was like, that is such a metaphor for how all of our lives have gone. I feel like I've done everything first, but then you did it full force. So I was like, I think how I would describe the influence with polyamory is as I started exploring my queerness in general, when I identified as bisexual and then pansexual and then polyamorous and kind of went on this journey, I think all of that was sort of opening the door to make it acceptable for my siblings to do the same. And then you kind of embraced it. You're making a face like you disagree with what I'm saying.
No. I don't know. I haven't thought about it before. I guess, I don't know the full perspective, but I don't know if you were here that day, but I was home, and I don't remember. Yeah, no, I think you were there. And our brothers started talking about how they identify sexually and romantically, and both of them were
earlier when the four of us identify as queer.
Both of them were we're more sexually attracted to women, but we're more romantically attracted to men. And I was just and these children are 18 and 15. And I was just who are these enlightened individuals who are our siblings? So I guess
you to gain these ethereal beings.
So I guess I don't know. I'm sure we all influence each other somewhat, and maybe it does go down from the top to the bottom. I guess if you had asked me, I wouldn't have said Lizzie was the trailblazer who opened all these things in my life. It's possible. Maybe. I don't know. That's not how the narrative was in my mind.
Yeah, I don't think that's how the narrative was in my mind either until my therapist asked the question. And then when my therapist asked the question, that's when I was like, well, I don't know. It's possible. I would love to think that I was this fantastic queer influence on all of my siblings, but I don't know if I actually wield that power. They might have come to it on their own regardless of me. I don't know.
I was just talking last night with my friend Leah, and we were talking about, I believe that personality is fairly well set by genetics. I think a lot of it is nature, because there's that one experiment with babies and introversion, extroversion. So I also think that we were just all naturally very predisposed to it somehow, and then we grew up in the right environment. And so I think we all, I don't know, all the right things came together. I don't know. What do you want me to say?
The four of us as siblings, our parents were very unconditionally loving. They do have their flaws. Our parents do have plenty of flaws, but they were unconditionally accepting of literally anything we wanted to do or try. So I think you disagree.
You say that, but mother, well, listen, I agree and disagree, because I believe that when I stopped shaving my sophomore year of high school, then she was not my most supportive fan. She didn't impede me or like threaten me, I guess. She wasn't like, you're grounded if you do this, but like she was not a fan. She was not a fan. She came around, but like I wouldn't say it started that way.
She herself stopped shaving her legs for a little bit, at least. There was like a year where she didn't either. So, I mean, she did eventually.
She comes around, but she doesn't always start that way.
She does not always start. Actually, yeah. When I got my tattoo was when she, oh my God, I had never... I think that's the most disappointed mother ever has been in me in her entire life was when I got this tattoo. She was like, you're going to get cancer. You're never going to get a job. No one's going to want to employ you. And like literally for the listeners who don't know what my tattoo is, I got a very small geometric tattoo in the middle of my forearm where a sleeve would cover it. So it's not even that visible. And my mother was just appalled. She thought I would never be employed again and that the ink was going to give me cancer and kill me. So maybe you're right that mother is not the most accepting. But by and large, I think our parents are more accepting than the average parents would be.
I will agree with that.
And I think that is the bigger factor in the four of us identifying as queer because we feel like we have the space to do that and still be accepted.
I was actually tangent. I was Googling yesterday because like I like to use the word queer. I have a thing with words, as people will probably discover, but I like the word queer because it's not tied to like, basically, I guess in my mind, queer just means not the combination of cis het. And the term I learned yesterday also, which is allo, which if you say allo cis het, that means that it's like the opposite of aromantic and asexual. So if you're allo cis het, then you are romantic, sexual, cisgendered, and heterosexual. So I like the word queer because to me, queer is just kind of the opposite of allo cis het.
Yeah.
But I was Googling yesterday because I was like, I know polyamory isn't like exactly a sexuality, but like I feel like it could fall under the umbrella of queer, and like the internet doesn't think so, which is fine and valid, but like it's similar, it's in the same ballpark.
It'll count.
We out here not being normal.
We're not normies.
Okay, cool. So, do you want to talk about the book?
Yeah, let's talk about the book I got you for Christmas. Who's a good gift giver? Me.
Hey, I also got you poly-themed present.
That's true. Jennifer got me, so I am a big math nerd, and Jennifer got me earrings in the shape of pi, the irrational number, and I love them so much. And we also found out when she got them for me that pi is a polyamorous symbol, which we didn't even know before we got them.
No, I got them before. I got them for you because I knew they were math and polyamory, because I am also a good gift giver.
I did not know that. Jennifer knew that. I was not aware.
Well, I will take that back. I am not a good gift giver, but that was a good gift.
That was a good gift. I was a very good. I think you're a good gift giver. I'm sure you've given me other good gifts.
It's not my natural instinct. Gifts are not my love language. I'm a minimalist. It doesn't come to me naturally.
You did good on the earrings, though. That was a good gift.
Okay, what I intended this podcast to be was discussing this book. I think we have hit some good things, and we will probably go off on lots of tangents, which was the point of this. Yes. But I do want to start with the book because it is a good book, and I've had lots of thoughts, and I just need to tell them to someone.
Hi.
Okay, so here we are. The book is called Sex at Dawn. I already told you the authors. I don't remember their names at this moment. But so the basic premise, and this is an oversimplification, read the book if you don't believe me. Read the book anyway, please. But the premise of the book is kind of taking an evolutionary historical approach to provide evidence against what they're calling the standard narrative, which is essentially that the standard narrative is that women should be sexually conservative because, you know, their reproduction takes a lot more time, and men should be very sexually jealous because they want to make sure that the children they raise are their own. And so that's kind of the standard narrative that people in general, at least in like, you know, Western worlds, tend to accept as like, this is the universal truth about humans. This is natural. This is normal. This is how we are. And so this book is looking at all the reasons why that is wrong. And it's a great book.
I should actually say the authors would probably want you to point out they never say it's wrong, because it was a very controversial book in its time just to be proposing any alternative. What they actually say is like, maybe this isn't the only way. But they're very specific in not being like, this is wrong. Because I think they're both actually identifying as monogamous, or at least they did at the time of the book. But they do just like very...
No. I'm not saying monogamy is wrong. I was saying that like the standard narrative of like men have to be jealous and women have to be conservative. Like maybe that's not a universal human truth.
That's the farthest they go though in the book. The farthest they go is they're like, maybe it's not true. IDK, please don't exorcise me from the church or whatever you do when...
Yes. Anything that seems very radical to you is probably coming from me. So while this is my reading of the book, if you want what the book actually says, you can read the book.
The book is significantly less radical than our interpretation of it, is what the authors would definitely want us to caveat.
Yeah. So that's the premise. And so what I have gotten very excited about is they use a lot of, it's very anthropological. Anthropology.
That's right. Yeah, anthropological.
Anthropological. And it looks at these different societies in the past and some that still exist in the future that are not the like very strict sexually sexually exclusive monogamous couples that in like America we pretend that we have, which in fact I don't feel like a lot of people actually practice.
Really don't.
So they look at like, especially in like hunter-gatherer societies, some of which still exist today, not a lot, but like back millions of years ago, maybe not, maybe it's thousands, I don't remember. But when there were about 5 million people on the earth, that was when it's like before the invention of agriculture. One of the takeaways I'm taking from this book, which do not attribute to the authors, but like agriculture is the root of all evil is what I'm trying to get at.
Honestly, yeah, agriculture fucked over women is what I got when we were reading that section, was like women got screwed as soon as we started farming.
So basically in these hunter-gatherer societies, it was much more typical for like people to have sex with a lot of other people in their group, and because sex was used more as a social bond maker than as primarily reproductive, which is one of the main points they made in one of the chapters I just read, is that we often think sex is primarily reproduction and then other functions, but in this book they're saying back in the day when we were like hunter-gatherers, which was like, you know, time-wise, percentage-wise, a lot more of our history, like agriculture is a fairly new thing. Like we were mostly, we were for a long time hunter-gatherer societies, and in those societies, sex was more used as like just another social activity, like a handshake, just with more contact. And again, I'm paraphrasing.
It's a lot more fun.
But where I started taking notes in the book is chapter 9. So that's kind of where we're starting. And I made this note because they brought up, for example, this society that I want to say was in Brazil, but I could, the Kulina of Amazonia. And so they have this great tradition where it is basically the men go out to hunt and the women say, we're only going to have sex with you if you bring back meat. And it's kind of like a joking thing. And so the men go out to hunt, and then before they enter the village, all the guys come together and they split up the meat evenly so that everybody gets laid.
Aww,
I know,
so
isn't it adorable?
It's adorable.
And like everybody knows this happens, but it's just like a little game they play. And like,
you're getting laid, everybody's getting laid.
Yes, and so this story was beautiful to me, as you can see. But kind of another one of the main points of the book is that like collaboration over competition was like the theme prior to agriculture, when things became much more individualistic and much more competitive. So like the thing with like these societies, it was more collaboration, and sex was a tool of like social cohesion. And like the reason that humans succeeded as a species was because we were social creatures. It's not competition, it's collaboration. Anyway.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I'm glad. I'm going to need to look up the name of that tribe because I just started seeing a guy who identifies as monogamous currently, but he has been very open to my speaking about polyamory.
For the moment.
Yeah, that's kind of, I'm like, you think you're monogamous now. Give us some time. We'll talk. But one of the first questions he asked me he was like, what cultures, like, are there modern day cultures that do this that I can like learn about? And I was like, that's a great question. I don't really know. So I'm going to look up this group of people later so I can send it to him and be like, hey.
There's a lot more coming at you. So just be ready because we're now coming up to one of my other favorite groups. Yeah. So one of my next favorite groups we're going to talk about, and I think they still do exist in modern time. And I'm going to botch this pronunciation, but I think this is how they told me to pronounce it in the book. But it's the Mwoso tribe. Not tribe. I don't know how to identify. The Mwoso group, which I think lives in it's near the border between China's Yunnan and Sichuan provinces. So in China. And so this group, their structure of the family unit is that it's like matriarchal. So there's like a woman and she has her children. And then when the daughters reach a certain age, they get a room on the exterior of the house. And those rooms all have doors that lead to the exterior. And basically what happens at night is that like all the guys go out and they visit whoever they want, and then the women let in whoever they want, and like they just have sex. It's, a consensual thing. And then if the women do have children, then they raise those children, with the matriarch, with their brothers. So like there isn't the same family unit structure as there is in the US. The women are just very sexually autonomous, and it's just great.
I love it. I think one of my favorite aspects of like communal type situations is I am getting to the point in my life where I am starting to think about whether or not children are something I want to have. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I would not want to have children unless I was basically in a commune. Like, I need to have several other adults whom I trust extremely before I decide, yeah, I think we could take a small human life and, raise it. That's a thing we could do. I would need a really strong support network of people if I were to do that.
Yeah, and that's another thing about polyamory and about this book is just kind of like communal living. I am so into communal living.
No.
I just want to live in a commune. If you have a commune, hit me up. I will come.
Get us up. We in.
But like for this community, they talk about how like every adult was responsible for every child. And like, I know the phrase is overused, but like it takes a village to raise a child. But just like, I just think that's such a better structure than like having two parents or one responsible for children and those people being like the main influence in those children's lives. If you're raised by many people, you can be like, oh, my parents are actually crazy. And, I don't have to be, because there are other ways the world works. And this is how it should be done.
One of the things, so both of us have studied Spanish fairly in depth in our educations, respectively. And I think one of the things that I really liked, way before I was even on this journey of exploring my queerness, was when we were studying Latin American cultures, how they live with the grandparents typically move into the homes of one of their children. And they have kind of, they're all biologically related, but often homes include grandparents and aunts and uncles and parents and children and cousins. And it's a big village type thing. And that always just resonated with me so much, where I was like, that's such a better living situation. Like just having, and I mean, I'm an extrovert through and through. So maybe that's part of what resonated with it, was just more people. Yes. But yeah, I think even when I was a straight identifying heterosexual, high school baby, those were the beginnings of my like wanting polyamory. I don't know.
Yeah. I think and I've mentioned this earlier, not in this podcast, but like when I was a kid, I remember thinking, cheating doesn't make sense because raised in a monogamous society, I was told there's the one, and then you love that person. You can only love one person. And then, cheating was like, something you probably hide from children, but like, we know it happens. And to me, as a child, I was baffled. I was like, if you can only love one person and you're cheating, then you probably love the person you're cheating with. So why wouldn't you just leave for that person? Like, obviously there's like, raising children that complicates things. But I think it's just was the little polyamorist in me being like, something's not right here.
You know what? It's a TV show and I'm going to blank on what it was, but you're reminding me of a line in a TV show. Oh, I think it was Friends or something. I don't know. But it's when a guy is like dating somebody. There were two guys who were talking. And one man was giving the other a pep talk, and he was like, I hope in your lifetime you find the greatest love of your life and you experience the excitement of falling in love and all these things. And I hope that when that happens to you, you have the courage to say, no thanks, I'm already married. And I was like, oh, God. I think it was Friends. I can't remember what TV show it was. But I remember when I heard that, I was like, that's so sad. Because, like, yeah, what if you do get married and then after you're married, you find somebody else who you actually vibe with more? And, like, it's so taboo for that to happen. But, like, it's nobody's fault. Like, if you literally just meet somebody later in life that it's like, oh, yeah, no, we are a way better partners than my current partner. So if you're committed to monogamy and, you don't want to get divorced, then, like, you're just screwed and be like, well, I guess I have to settle for this other life that I am not as happy in, but those are the rules. Aw, shucks. Like, that's dumb. I don't like that.
Yeah, and this is probably just a pretty narrative that I've constructed for myself, but like throughout high school and like even the beginning of college, like I never had like any sort of quote unquote romantic relationship whatsoever. And I never really had a desire to.
To be fair, Jennifer and I went to a very conservative high school, and the people that we had to select from were
That's true. It was a small pool. But even in college, I never really like had a super strong desire to like date. And I think besides being a communal polyamorous queer person, that I think just the thought of like dating in a monogamous setting is just so much pressure, because it's just like, is this person the one? And if not, am I wasting this person's time? Will we get together and then someday wake up and realize we were wrong? And so I think that was also something that kind of turned me off from relationships.
And that's part of what I hate about the concept of like dating to marry is like, if you date someone and have this wonderful, fulfilling relationship and have a great time together, but you don't get married, people are like, oh, it's a waste of time. Like, you just wasted 3 years on that person. Like, it was a complete and utter waste of everyone's time because you didn't get married. And it's like, no, like, you can have a profound impact on someone's life in that amount of time. Like, I take a lot of things from various partners I've had over the years. Like, the way I cook ramen comes from a guy that I dated a while back and showed me how to put the egg in the ramen. I think somebody showed me that that I was sleeping with. I don't know, but when we make ramen, and we take a little egg and crack it at the end to make like egg drop soup in our ramen, and it's delightful. And I'm pretty sure I got that from a guy I used to sleep with. But anyway, I think you can have wonderful impacts on people's lives and not marry them. And that's fine. And it doesn't mean the relationship was a waste. Like, it's still, a beautiful, fulfilling, wonderful time in your life.
Yeah. I mean, there's also just the thing of like change, like marrying someone and being like, okay, forever. Like, this is the forever thing. It's like, well, like, what if I change? What if you change? What if the situation changes?
And you will, and they will, and it will.
Yeah. And like, I was talking with my friend Leah, and she was like, well, I want someone where it will be like forever and constant. And I was like, I mean, even with monogamous marriage, like, divorce is still a reality. And sure, there are a lot of things that are built into society that are supposed to like, dissuade you from that. Things change. And like, it's like, yeah, sure, like, financials are a thing, and like child rearing is a thing. And like stability, you know, I'm a young person, so stability probably isn't my top priority, but like, I don't know. It's just, I think things change and we should be open and accepting of that. And like, yeah, it sucks, but like, I don't know. That's all I'm saying. Like,
well, and
things
I
change.
think also one of the consequences of monogamy, because you only get one person, there is so much pressure put onto that decision because it's thought of as like you get one and that is your one. And so it's a big deal. Whereas with the way I've practiced polyamory, it's taken so much pressure off of things because it's not, you only get one. And I think when I was in high school, I also didn't have a strong desire to date, which again, I think is in part because of the high school that I went to. But also it was so much pressure because again, in that conservative town, it was like you date to marry and like you get one shot and that's it. So do not waste your opportunity. This chance comes once in a lifetime. And I think when I got to college and everybody practiced ethical non-monogamy, it was so much less pressure because it wasn't like, you know, we have to be a perfect match or we're wasting each other's time. It was like, yeah, let's just enjoy the moment while we're in it. We'll do this as long as it makes sense. And then if it stops making sense, we'll stop doing it. And, you know, both be better, more fulfilled people at the end and everybody's happy.
You know what's tragic is that I'm going into my last semester of college, and this means I can't do it because you can found organizations at my school in the fall of an academic year, and like if I had one more year, I would definitely be founding a polyamory club, and like that would be so amazing because like my school, at least in the circles I've been in, I don't think we've had that much of that same kind of culture at my school. I think it's more monogamous, but I also have not really been in the dating circles, so I don't really know. But I would found a polyamory club so hard.
You know what's equally tragic in my life story is I'm pretty sure the college I went to had one of those, but I just had not started my journey in exploring that yet. And so I did not partake, and I regret that so much. The funny thing is, a lot of people told me, so the college I went to was very, very, very liberal. And a lot of people told me that like when you get out into the real world, you'll become less liberal, like you'll adapt, you'll like get really into capitalism, particularly because I do math and I do make a lot of money in my job. And they're like, oh yeah, once you like make money, you're going to become conservative and, you know, the stock market and all these things. I have only become more liberal since graduating. And like, yes, I do have financial security and it's fantastic. Cannot recommend highly enough financial security, but I have only become more radically liberal since graduating college. And man, if I could go back, there are so many things I would have done differently, and it would have been even more queer than I was when I was in college. Regrets.
I think mine, I mean, I think we're probably saying the same thing, but just it's funny the way you phrase it of becoming more radical. I think how I've phrased it has been like, I am this very radical being, and it's just me discovering how radical I was, because like I didn't identify as queer until like my junior fall year, when everyone else knew that I was queer except me. Everyone knew. I was just the last one to know. And then it was funny because when I was in that quote unquote relationship with a couple, my freshman year of college, I think someone who like knew us asked me and was like, are you guys like, you know, like a throuple? And I was like, no, that's not a real thing. No, heaven forbid, no. But like, we were in a lot of ways. And like, I would have, if I had been, you know, cognizant of that, I probably would have enjoyed sexual relations with them as well. But c'est la vie, it is past.
Hindsight's 2020.
2020.
That phrase takes on a whole new meaning now, doesn't it, Doug?
Hindsight sucks.
Hindsight is terrible.
I mean, it still means the same thing. It still means the same thing.
Well, no, 2020 is supposed to be perfect. Like the saying means hindsight is perfect. And 2020 is no longer.
I mean, yes, but like it means you can like see your mistakes and how you could have done better. Though I don't know how. Yeah. I mean, so much could have gone better. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, back to book. Now that we had that, but something that about this Moswo society is that they are considered matriarchal because like family units are structured around the matriarch, which makes sense because like your parenthood can only before DNA testing, your parenthood was only certain about your mother whose vagina you exited. Literally, like who the father was.
The beginning of the Bible. I remember when you and I both had to read that. I was high school, you were in middle school, I think. But the beginning is all of these like familial lines, and it's all through the dad. And like I remember there were several parts, I think, in the Bible where they were like they found out like the dad wasn't the dad, and it's like, then why did we do it this way? Why didn't we just have it through the mom? We do it that way. Like that would have been the better way to do it.
Well, I think it might have been before I started taking notes, but they talked about another society where they defined parenthood very collectively, as I've already discussed, but they specifically thought that like babies were made not out of a single egg and a sperm, but they thought that like babies were made out of like sperm essentially. So like multiple men could contribute to a child, and like when the child was born, it was like made up of all the sexual partners that the woman had, and that's how they defined paternity. So like everybody, like all the men, just like, you know, were like, all of these children are mine. And what it just reminded me is the point of like why this is a good system is they talked about it in bonobo societies, which I know you really wanted to talk about the bonobos, Liz.
I want to hit the bonobos. At some point we got to talk about bonobos.
But the utility of this system is that when men are certain, or as certain as they can be, of their paternity, then a tendency is for males to kill off children who aren't theirs. Whereas in societies where paternity is like uncertain or just much more collectively thought of, then like it's much better for society as whole, because then the men will protect all of the children. And like, that's just how it should work.
It really is. Okay. I'm gonna talk about bonobos because bonobos are my new favorite animal. Aside from cats, because I really like cats too. My two cats are my babies. But anyway, bonobos. So what we can learn from bonobos is that hoes will bring about world peace. And that is the takeaway from the bonobo society. But anyway, I digress. So in Sex at Dawn, part of what they discuss is how some of the theory that humans are naturally monogamous is derived from other animal species that are naturally monogamous. And they're like, oh, look at these animals who do monogamy in the absence of society. If they do it, then clearly it could also be natural for us. However, our closest animal relatives in terms of evolution, and I think maybe DNA also, I'm not sure, maybe brain size, they're one of our closest relatives, are the bonobos. And in bonobo societies, the females will sleep with as many men as they possibly can to basically confuse the males about which child is theirs. And so that leads to what Jen was talking about earlier of this concept of shared paternity. And you end up with these really lovely male friendships because all of these men are fathering the same child, and these really lovely female friendships. And they're just these really peaceful, happy communities because all the women are hoes. So in sum, hoes bring world peace. The end. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yes. Well, not just that, but they talk about when two bonobo clans mix together, like the way that, you know, the reason there's not like tension is because the females will cross borders and go sleep with, you know, the new males that they find. And like, because of this, like social bonds are created, as I talked about, like sex being used as like a social bond tool. And so that's why like promiscuous, which they talk about the word in the book and like how it has a very, like the word promiscuous has a negative connotation in our society, but like promiscuous just means having like multiple sexual partners. So like it's not an inherently negative term. So just like how promiscuity like brings about social cohesion. But what I was going to talk about when we got back to the book was in these matriarchal societies, which A, just make sense genetically, but B, they talk about how like when people sometimes arguments against like matriarchy is that I think people conceive matriarchy as just a female patriarchy where like one, you know, like women would just like rule over men. But in this Moswo society, they call it matriarchal, but like it doesn't look like a patriarchy with women. It looks, how they describe it, neither sex rules because male and females complement one another. So in this quote unquote matriarchy, it really just is an egalitarian society. Because
turns out not everybody turns into a dirtbag when they come into power.
Yeah, because it's just about equality, man. Equality. Oh, this was a quote I liked. Human societies in which women are sassy and confident tend to be far more comfortable places for most men than societies ruled by male elite. Because this is a point I like to make a lot, which is that in a patriarchy, in the society we live in now, yes, it objectively sucks for women more, but men kind of have a shitty time too. And like everybody would be happier.
Oh, absolutely.
Everyone would be happier. Like, this is a controversial thing I'll say, but like, I don't like the term feminism. Another thing with Jen having problem with words. I don't like the term feminism because I think a lot of people think, oh, you're fighting for women. And yes, I am, but I'm fighting to break down gender altogether and to equality. I just want equality, which is why I like the term gender abolition, because I'm trying to get rid of gender altogether and bring about equality. But that's another topic anyway.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you're right that feminism is truly about gender equality, but the word doesn't convey that as much.
Yes. As our brother has said, liberals are very bad at naming things.
Bad at
We're
naming
just bad.
things. I mean, liberals in particular, but naming things is hard, dude. I liked the TikTok of the guy, or I guess I don't know how, not a guy. I liked the TikTok of the person who was talking about how they didn't identify as straight and they did not identify as cis, but they couldn't figure out what word to use. So they were like, my sexual identity is straint, so I ain't straight, and my gender identity is ciscent, because I isn't cis. Do you remember that TikTok? It was a great TikTok.
I'd heard strained before. I hadn't heard ciscent. That's great. I love that.
I'm gonna have to send you that TikTok because I thought you were the one who sent it to me, but it must not have been.
It's possible. I'd heard of strained before. I mean, I can talk forever about how I recognize this is probably a very personal thing, but I don't care for labels at all, as I've discussed in depth with Elizabeth. I do not care about labels. Just be who you want to be, Barbie girl.
I, as a mathematician, frequently work with mathematical models, and I recognize that labels are more of a model for human identities, and so they may not always be correct, but they are occasionally useful to convey meaning, because words are a tool to convey meaning. And I think occasionally labels can be helpful in conveying meaning, but they are just a model, and models are wrong, so they're not going to be perfect.
I will be a label abolitionist until the day I die, and I've accepted that. I've come to peace with that.
You can do that. I will fully support you, and you will own the label of label abolitionist while you do it.
Lawyered. Yes, okay. Anyway, back to something you said about, they do bring up how like people talk about like looking at monogamy in the animal kingdom. And I could be wrong about this because I didn't mark the quote, but I think in reality, monogamy as we think of it is actually very rare in animal societies. And what I did mark is that they talk about penguins, which are usually used as this model of perfect monogamy and fidelity. But like, the thing is, as it says here, penguins are monogamous only as long as it takes to get their little ones out of the egg. So like penguins will mate and pair and raise an egg until it hatches, but then they will not necessarily raise another brood, I think, is like another round of children. But I guess they probably only do one egg at a time.
Oh, I think they only do one at a time. Wait, so I was under the impression, I think I had been told that penguins mate for life and will raise a chick and then do another one the next year and another one the next year. Is that not correct?
There's multiple species of penguins is the thing. So when you say penguins, there's like a lot of variety. In the ones that they're talking about in the book, I want to say they're talking about emperor penguins, but I could be wrong. So it could be that there are some, but they also, just a fun fact, have recorded penguin prostitution in penguins because sex is a social tool.
It really is. I also loved, do you remember that one time when my car blew a tire in the middle of the street and we had to wait for Dad for like an hour to come rescue us in the middle of the road, and we watched that Daniel Slott stand up about the gay penguins, and it sparked joy.
It did spark joy. So that's all of chapter 9.
Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, leave us a review on your podcast app.
If you really like us, like us, send this episode to a friend, family member, or partner, or your boss. It'll start some interesting conversations.
Maybe not your boss.
If your boss is chill.
Your boss is chill, you could.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.